You guys like unboxing videos, right? Well, let's unbox this guy. This is a Kemper profiler. I've done some videos with the Kemper in the past, but so many of you have been asking if I can check it out again on my channel. So this is going to be one of the rack mount versions of the Kemper. So let's get straight into it. Last time I did an unboxing video, a few of you complained about the knife. So I'm going to use a nail file this time just to piss you off even more. Let's get into it. Where's that? I think that's it. And oh, cool. Someone had already taken out the staples, which is nice. So yeah, if you're not sure what profiling is, hopefully I'll explain it in this video. But until then, let's check it. Not only is that joke highly original, it's incredibly funny. In all seriousness though, this is the Kemper rack profiler. This is the unpowered version. If you have a look at the front panel, let me just press that right there, you have a collection of knobs which act like real amp control. So once you've gone and profiled something, which I'll explain in a second, you can essentially use these knobs to tweak your virtual amp. And then across the top we've got a section dedicated to the amplifier, a bunch of pre-effects which is called stomp, and a bunch of post-effects labeled as delay and reverb, but in reality you can go through and pretty much use them for anything. There are compressors, there is a massive library of different delays, reverbs, modulation effects, drive pedals, kind of everything you would want in a modeling device. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people forget about with this. They just kind of look at the sort of quasi-magical aspect of profiling and forget that the effects in here sound pretty darn good. There's also quick controls for like the reverb or delay or whatever you've got assigned there, and a very cool rotary chicken head knob which selects between power on tuner, your browser mode if you want to go through and select a rig, your performance mode, and then the profiling mode, and then on the back there's essentially all the ins and outs, which is pretty cool. One thing that I really like about this is it's got a little USB slot where you can have all your profiles on a stick. Say if you were touring the world as a world famous rock star and you said to people, hey, I use a Kemper, I need it as my backline. You could literally travel with your guitar on a USB stick, get to a gig, plug it into the Kemper, and basically load up your profiles. You don't need a computer or anything like that. So that's super cool. That's the box. Let's actually plug it in. I'm going to be recording all of this direct and monitoring it with my Atom A7X studio monitors. I'm running it into a UAD Apollo Twin. Let's just have a listen to some sounds. There's obviously so many features and uses for this thing that it's really easy to forget that you can just open the box, use the built-in profiles and effects, and it sounds really, really good. So I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite profiles. Some of these are factory profiles and some are profiles that I've made. We'll also make a profile at the end of the video, which I think will be really fun and interesting, and compare it to the real amp. So this is one of my favorite profiles in here. This is like a Fender Vibroverb thing. I think it's an Amp Factory preset. It sounds like this. I'm playing a YJM Strat on the neck pickup. So that's pretty sweet. What we can do is add effects to that. So I'm going to use the stomp section. I'm going to hold down the A button and it will bring up a menu where I can select between different effects. What I want is a compressor. So let's find a compressor. Okay, so this is the hard compressor at the stock settings. This is perfect for a funky thing. So I like that, and what I would add is maybe a delay after the amp, so I can hold down the delay button, but you can assign any effect to any of these buttons. So if you want delay before the amp, you can do that as well, which is super handy. So this is a delay setting called Dark Grains. Just scrolling through that then, there's so many delays that you could just take up a whole video with the different delay modes, but this one's pretty cool and pretty freaky sounding. Another built-in profile that I really like is this Michael Britt Friedman profile. It's perfect for just chewy rock sounding stuff. We're going to move on to a profile that I made. This one is based around my, well, actually not mine, it's my friend Troy's old Marshall JMP. It's a super bright amp, it's a super loud amp in the real world as well, so it's pretty cool to have it captured in here. This is the neck pickup. So that's pretty cool. I've got this laid out with a couple of different pedals. This should be a boost. Then I've got some delay. And I've got some modulation in front of everything. Which is pretty sweet, I think. So that is super noisy, so I'm going to turn the noise gate on. There we go. Pretty quick overview, and you can see in there, like say on this particular rig, I'm going to turn the delay off but leave the boost on. If I want to go in and tweak the amp EQ, it's really, really easy to do. I've got these controls here. If I want more or less gain, say I turn the boost off, I'll turn everything off. So this is just straight up the profile with nothing else. And it's super bright on the bridge pickup. So what I would want to do is bring the treble down, bring the mids up, and I want to add a bit more gain. So let's bring the treble down. So that's one of the most popular things about the Kemper, actually, is just being able to twist knobs. It's got a really tactile interface, and most of the people that I know who actually own a Kemper say this, that they basically just like shooting a profile, and then you chuck it in your rack, or if you're using the head, you take it to a gig, and pretty much just use a 3-band EQ to sort of dial it in to the specs of the room, which I think is pretty cool. So there's a couple of basic sounds. Why don't we actually go and make a profile of an amp? Because I know you're all hanging out to see how that works. Let's go and do that. I'm going to use my Seriotone Son of Yeti. Okay, let's go ahead and profile this amp. On the profiling assistant, you can start by having a listen to your reference amp against the so-called Kemper amp. So let's do that. This is the reference sound that I'm going for. So let's go ahead and profile it with the browser, sorry, not the browser, with the profiling assistant. We'll hit that and we'll just go ahead and start profiling. And there we go, that's the profiling process, so that's always a good time to like check your emails or check Facebook or something. This, now we can compare the Kemper amp to the real thing. Well, I'm not going to tell you which one's which, see if you can hear a difference. It's not too bad at all. What I'm going to go back through and do now is refine this profile. So I'm basically just going to play with this guitar so that it can listen to some of the dynamics coming through with the way the amplifier responds to different playing. So let's do that. and basically that's how you refine the profile. So I like to play some chugs, I like to play all over the neck and get a lot of the high strings. Now let's compare. They both sound really good. To me, the Kemper amp has a little bit more bottom end in there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I can save that profile and go back through and tweak this and build a rig out of it, like we did with the built-in profiles where you can add effects and you can use the EQ and things like that. So yeah, it literally takes that long, and if you've got a particular amp and a particular cabinet and microphone that you really like the sound of, this is a great way to capture it. That is such a brief overview. There's so much going on in this steampunk retro-futurist little thing. I don't even know how you would describe the aesthetic of this, but it definitely has its own thing going on aesthetically. It definitely has its own thing going on sonically. I know the first question a bunch of you guys is you're gonna ask me is, hey, I know you use an Axe-Fx and I know you've just tried an Atomic and a Helix. Which one should I get? Which one's the best? And I'm going to do another video on all of this at a later date. But for me, the way I would use the Kemper, and I think the part of the guitar market that the Kemper is oriented towards is if either A, you've got a collection of amps sitting around in your studio that you love the sound of, but you don't want to take out to gigs or on tour, profile them with this and basically store them in this virtual library. And it's wicked. You can basically take the character out of all your amps and take it on the road. I think the profiles, you need to sort of get into the swing of knowing how to refine things and knowing how to fine-tune stuff for your guitars. I do have a video that's going to come out next week about the studio EQ in this thing, which I think is one of the most underrated and underutilized thing. If you go on like the Kemper Rig Exchange, so many profiles sound really boomy and harsh, and that can be fixed with just some simple EQ. So that's one thing which is in there that I think a lot of people just need to use more. In terms of like the amp thing, a lot of people talk about this sort of like effect that there's a bit of a cocked wah kind of sound on everything, which I will be honest, I do hear a little bit of that in there. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, because I think a lot of people, you know, you've seen these like amp shootouts where people like Kemper or real amp, they're like, oh my god, the Kemper sounds better, I like the sound more. It's probably coming from that thing in the mid-range where, you know, having some extra mid-range, not necessarily a bad thing when you're a guitar player, especially if you're playing in a rock or a metal band. So if you're that kind of player and you've got a collection of great amps, take them out. They sound great in a mix. They're pretty much ready to go. So the other sort of player is like if you've got the money to spend on something and you don't want to have something that's sort of like computer based, that has a lot of like knobs that you can twiddle and has a very tactile interface. If that's super important to you, I think the Kemper is probably right up your alley because you can just load up a bunch of great sounding profiles and press buttons and use it like an amp. So it's sort of like the modeler for people who don't like modelers in that sense. Whereas to me, something like an Axe-Fx, and to a degree the Helix as well, they're just this like massive open platform. I love the Axe-Fx because I can basically just go in and like create new sounds that I've never heard before and really try to create my sound, whereas I see the Kemper as like, if you've already created your sound with real-world amplifiers, you can capture that sound in the digital format. So I would say, if you're that kind of player, then the Kemper is probably for you. If you're somebody like me, where you just love to create weird new sounds and have super in-depth editing, something like an Axe-Fx. If you don't want to go super deep, you might want to look at something like the Helix or the Atomic because they're a lot more user-friendly in that sense, where it's sort of like a little bit more tactile. But this thing is probably the most like an amp in the way it is to use. So yeah, that's kind of my wrap. I think it's an amazing unit. Like I've said, the Axe-Fx is amazing, the Helix is amazing, the Atomic stuff is amazing, the Moore GE series is amazing. Really just depends on what you need to use it for, and hopefully this video has been illuminating in that sense. Hopefully it's given you a better idea of what the Kemper actually does and whether you should get one or not. I've been Leon, you guys have been great. I will see you all around real soon. Again, thanks to Mega Music for loaning me one of these for a couple of days. Really appreciate it, guys. Go and check out their website if you're in Australia and you want to go and get one. And I'm going to go make some toast. See ya! Imagine being Christoph Kemper and you come up with this amazing piece of guitar hardware that's changed the way so many players play guitar, or at least use their rigs live. So many touring pros as well, and studio musicians. And dickheads like me just make jokes about toast. Sorry, man.